All right, friends, I am so happy about who we get to welcome back to the show today. I feel like I just don't even know how to introduce you because of how important you are to me and how important you've been to girls' night. So anyway, Marri, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. I was actually thinking this morning as I was getting ready that it truly feels like returning to like a girls' night, that I like have my little life updates. And I feel like I've been like attending girls' night for however many years it's been now. Like I was with you when you started it. Yeah. And I remember my first little introduction, I was like, I'm Marri. I think I was like, I have a little girl and I'm married and like I hang out with her. And my career and my family have had so many changes and transitions since then. And I feel like every time I come on, my little blurb about myself is way different. So I'm like coming back to the girls to give you an update about my life. It just feels like that it's been this witness to and companion for, the past 5 or so years of things changing and growing, but that like this is a constant, and that feels really very warm and cozy.
I love that. There's like no other way I would want girls' night to feel. And really, you were with me. Like you were the first person I was like, I'm thinking about doing a podcast. I'm not totally sure if I know how to do this. Mm-hmm. And you and I did like a sample podcast episode that was like 2 hours long and bad. And I think we did a couple. No, we didn't know anything. And we like trashed it. And and I'm like, I don't know how to host a podcast.
Yeah. And now you've got all this this cool little interface that we're on. I feel like you've learned so much and grown so much. I remember we had during that first episode a little sticky note that just said, it's okay to be a beginner. Remember that?
Yes. And it was taped to the microphone.
Yeah, and now you're not a beginner anymore. You're just a veteran.
I mean, I'm still a beginner in like every single way that matters in life. Except, but yeah, no, I've actually learned a couple things about podcasting.
Yeah, ring light. I have ring light. We're moving up in the world, yeah.
Yes, we are. I have a good microphone set up only because you had one first. And I was like, how are you doing this? Okay, so Marri, I need to know, for women who haven't met like official you yet, tell us who you are, what you do, and a fun fact. And also like I really should know this. What's like your official work name? It's Mariko Clark, right?
Oh, good.
Or do you go Straighten? Or do you Marri Straighten?
I have been going by Mariko Clark, which is my maiden name and also my middle name for years now, only because Mariko is sometimes tricky for people to pronounce. It's Japanese. And then my current last name is Straighten, but almost everyone who reads it will say Stratton. And I hate to correct people twice. Almost everyone will say Mariko Stratton, and I hate to be like, it's actually Mariko, and it's actually also Straighten. So Clark is pretty straightforward. Almost no one messes that up. A little easier on the memory, so...
Yeah. Okay.
So
we also have to say
Clark.
It was on anyone who has a name that gets mispronounced. Yeah. Tell your friends that they're mispronouncing it, because if you guys have been around the show for a long time, you know that Marri and I had been friends for years when I introduced her as, oh shoot, now I'm going to do it wrong.
You said Mariko, which is what almost everyone does.
And you were like,
I think I corrected you on air.
You did. And it had been like 3 years. And I was like, Marri, I will kill you, not because you're doing this right now, but because you didn't do this years ago.
I know. So anyway, I think it's just like you almost never called me that. And then I was like, oh, shoot. Here's a situation where she does call me that. I should let her know.
Yeah.
But yes. So I'm Mariko Clark. Longtime friend of the show, longtime friend of Steph. We met in Nashville when I was living there. I am a writer. I just got my first book deal last year. It was very exciting for a book that we had launched on Kickstarter. It's a story Bible for kids. And then it went really well. One thing led to another. And now I'm working towards my deadline for an actual publisher, which feels crazy. So that feels really exciting. I have 3 kids. So I have a mom role that I switch back and forth, do the whole working mom thing. Steph, you know all about that.
Totally.
I have a husband. I live with my in-laws. We do sort of like the multi-generational house thing, which has been a very cool and fun experiment. And I live in Indianapolis now. That's the bigger update, I guess. Oh, and fun fact, I need to go get a prop for my fun fact stuff. You're going to like this.
This is maybe the first time on the show that someone needs to get a prop. This is amazing. Yes, yes.
Hold on, let me put my headphones on.
Okay.
Sorry, that was hard on the audio. Because now that you video record, I can show this.
Uh-huh.
I was just telling Steph, for any of our 90s babies in the audience, you'll remember seeing commercials on TV when you were watching Nick at Night. Maybe not Nick at Night, but for the ab slide. I was telling Steph I had one in high school. My older brother and I saved up our money and sent away the little envelope of cash to buy the ab slide. Got totally shredded one summer when I was like 14. We had a little six-pack. It worked wonders for me. So I just had my third kid. Not just, he's 2 years old. And I was like, you know what? I want to get my core back in shape. I know what I need. So I went on eBay and I bought an ab slide. And I was just showing it to Steph before we started recording. So just so everyone knows, that's an option. Ab slide. There was many of them on eBay. I don't know why people aren't snatching this up. But that's my fun fact. I have an ab slide and they do it in my office when I take breaks from writing.
I can't. I just am I'm so happy. I'm so happy. It's so amazing. Oh man, I'm so glad you guys get to hear from Marri again today. Okay. All right, Marri. I have a lot of questions for you. And I really want to talk about moving today. Because you and I, for the girls who have been listening to the show for a while, you and I both moved to Nashville around the same time. And you and I both were like, we don't like small talk. We don't want to make new friends. This is hard. This is uncomfortable. No, thank you. And we had a mutual friend set us up. It was like love at first sight. That is, totally. I mean, we were at coffee for a million years, but like neither of us wanted to go. And so we've told that story before about how our friendship unfolded, what it was like for us to both move to Nashville. I feel like you had an easier time than I did. I was like unsure about the whole thing for a while. I just resisted making a new home for a really long time.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of talked about that before, but not enough. And then you also just made a really big new move.
Yes.
And so I just want to talk about that because you've done a really good job over the years. And then you're also currently in the process of doing this again, of moving to a new place and making a new home. And so I want to hear about it. So I want to first ask, you moved from Boston to Nashville.
Yep.
What made you, why did you do that? How did you figure out that that was a good next move for you? And how did the process of making a new home go?
Yeah. So when we moved to Boston, it was one of those, Drew, that's my husband, and I, we always joke that God moves us through life through our humor. We'll realize there's something that we've been joking about for a while. Wouldn't it be so funny if blank? And then it's almost like we have to joke about it before we feel brave enough to explore it seriously. So we had been joking for a little while, wouldn't it be so funny if our jobs let us work remotely? Oh, wouldn't that be so funny if we could just live wherever we wanted? Oh yeah, that's so funny. Let's make a list of all the cities where we would want to live. Okay, cool. That's hilarious. Let's talk more seriously about where we'd want to go. Okay, let's plan a little exploratory trip to Nashville. Oh, that's hilarious. And just through all of these little tricking ourselves into baby steps, sort of narrowed it down to a couple of cities. And Drew had family at the time living in Nashville. Two of his brothers at the time were at college at Belmont in Nashville. And that felt safe. It felt good to have family. We had wanted somewhere new. It didn't feel completely out of the blue to try Nashville. I had wanted to live somewhere warmer. I had been doing the Boston winters my entire life. I don't like cold weather. So ended up in one of those things where every little baby step we took and every sort of exploratory tendril we would send out just came back Like I say that like we didn't even walk through doors or knock on them. Like God just drop kicked us through them. And we were like, oh, now we're here. Like, we like found a neighborhood that we thought would be cool to live in. And then all of a sudden we have a house. It just was like one of those things that felt undeniable and very easy as far as logistics go. Because moves can be incredibly complex and stressful. And I feel like everyone I know who has moved anywhere has this like really dramatic story about how it almost didn't work out and then it did. And we just didn't have that experience. So that's how we ended up in Nashville. It was kind of like started as a joke and then made our way there. And it ended up being incredibly life-giving and healing. We went through some pretty intense transitions while we were there, just like with family and with faith and all the big topics. And for us specifically, being in a brand new place to explore big decisions was really liberating and healing. I feel like I have some people pleasing tendencies, and I probably, if we had not been in a brand new space with new people, would have leaned into what I thought would make other people happy. But instead, I was like, well, I'll just do whatever I want, or I'll do whatever Drew and I decide is a good decision, or I'll, lean into my intuition instead of, trying to please all these people around me. And that was ended up being a really fortifying and clarifying position to be in for us.
I love that. I really, moving to Nashville for me was so complicated because I just wanted to move home. Like I'm from Colorado and I wanted to end up back there, and I ended up living not in Colorado. I agreed to 6 months. I was like, I'll move to Georgia for this job. I'll be there for 6 months and then I'm going to go home. Or if I don't go home, I'm going to go to the beach somewhere. And like those were my options. And then I met Carl, and one thing led to another. And then all of a sudden we're like living in Georgia. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm in love. We're getting married. We really like our jobs. We'll stay here. But then we lost our jobs. And so we were trying to figure out, where we were going to replant ourselves. And we tried to move to Colorado. We applied for all kinds of jobs and heard like truly crickets, like didn't even get an email back.
Yeah.
And then, finally doors opened in Nashville. And so we moved here, and Nashville's an amazing place, like really amazing.
Yeah.
It's an awesome place to live. Everybody loves it. And it's because it's super lovable. Like it's as amazing as everybody says.
I agree.
But I didn't want to be here because this isn't where my closest people were. And I just was really resistant to making new closest people because I think I felt like I was letting go of the people I already loved by loving new people, or letting go of a place that I really loved by loving a new place. And that's not true. You can love two places or more places. You can love lots of people all at once. And that's kind of what I feel like God's been teaching me since I've lived here. And once I started to embrace that, it made living here so much easier. But there was a really long time where I was like, this is technically my new home, but like I will not be at home here. And so that made the process like way harder for me. And that's something like I just would do things really differently moving forward. If we were to ever move again, I would like do everything I could to make it home as fast as possible, like to embrace it as fast as possible, because I know that that's like the path to feeling at home. And I feel like that's what you did. Like you guys came here and like really cozied in. What did that look like? What were some of the things that you guys did to make Nashville feel like home?
Yeah, I think that one thing, I feel like I've maybe talked a little bit about it here on the podcast, at some point over the years. One thing I think that I did was I challenged myself when we moved to Nashville to just say yes to things. That is not my typical stance. I love to say no to things. That is my favorite thing to do. But I had thought like, if I protect my energy so much that if I want to stay in my safety, I'll never make this a home. Yeah, like you're saying, if I'm so set on not putting myself out there, then I'm making it harder on myself. So I had sort of challenged myself, knowing how I can be. I'm just going to say yes to things. So whether it was, yes to trying at a new church, yes to even just like I had a Ada, my daughter was like 1.5 at the time. And the way I am, it's like before I go to a new place, I want to, even if it's like to a new coffee shop, I'm going to do my research. I'm going to find out where I can park. I'm going to find out like what door to go through. And I'm going to look at the menu. I just like to do a lot of prep ahead of time. And I was like, I can't do that with absolutely every decision in Nashville. I'll get overwhelmed and I'll say no. So I was just saying yes to things, whether it was like, I'm going to walk to that coffee shop we drove by earlier. And I'm not going to like do too much work ahead of time. I'm just going to do it. And one of the things I said yes to was coffee with this strange person named Stephanie, a super rando I connected me with. And it ended up being wonderful. And I feel like you were one of my very first friends in Nashville. And I feel like our first date, as we like to call it, that going so well actually gave me the confidence to continue to say yes to things. I think if I had said yes to something that had been tragic or even just really boring, it would have taken the wind out of my sails. But instead it was like I had challenged myself to something new. It was incredible. It was this affirmation of that new goal of mine. And yeah, I think that was a really big thing, was just saying yes to opportunities, even if they felt minute. Like, you know, everything, when you're in a new place, it can feel really overwhelming. Like all the grocery stores in Nashville had totally different names from the grocery stores in Massachusetts. It's like that can feel overwhelming. You know, all of the restaurants, even like the way the streets are laid out in Nashville, that was new for me. Like I had never had an alley behind my house before. They don't have those in New England. It's like, it can feel really overwhelming. So I think the challenge of saying yes just sort of almost gives you this tunnel vision, because otherwise there's so much sensory input going on all the time, and it's easy to just kind of shut down and be like, nope, it's too much. I'm just going to stick with what's familiar. But almost like giving yourself that singular task of saying yes to what comes up.
Mm-hmm.
It almost like helps you focus, because otherwise it's too much.
I love that. I love that. Something that I've been practicing and these are all things where I'm like, some of these I did right. Some of these I didn't. Some of these I would like, all of this I would do. This is how I would do it if we did it again. Like going places twice. Mm-hmm. So it's like the first time you go to a new grocery store, it's super weird. Like the parking thing really gets me. And like, I remember being at that coffee shop with you and I'd never been to that one before. And so I like didn't know which part of the counter to stand at to order. And like, I didn't know if like once you order your food, if they like bring it to you or if you wait or like, and I just felt so uncomfortable. And like everyone was just staring at me, which no one was. Like everyone's focused on their own thing. But I just felt so uncomfortable. But it's like making myself go again. Because then the next time I'll know where to order the next time. And so then that becomes a familiar place. It went from being a strange place the first time to the second time I go, now it's a familiar place. And now it's a place that's like under my belt, in my repertoire. You know, I can choose to go there in the future. And so I just always have to remember that. And then I like that you do some research. I need to get better at that faster because, and I know I've shared this on the podcast before, but I love taking walks. It's like so therapeutic for me. And so everywhere where we've lived, I've been like, that's like my walk spot. Well, the first whole year that we lived in Nashville, I didn't like look up where parks were. And so I walked around our apartment building and just did loops like behind the car wash, by the dumpsters, behind the car wash, by the dumpsters, like just in a loop for a year, just walk through the parking lot for a year, which is fine. But when I did some research, I found out that there's like this gorgeous green belt kind of walking trail, like a mile and a half away that I could have been walking around. I just want to like look it up. Instead of a dumpster. So just like a little bit of research. And then the first time I walked around that loop, I thought like, is this actually a loop or am I just going to walk and walk and walk and get just further and further and further away from my car? Like I went in the middle of the day, I had my phone, I had some money on me, you know, like it wasn't supposed to rain. And I got to find out it is in fact a loop and I made it back to my car. And then the next time I went, I like knew what to expect.
Yes, exactly. Going twice. I feel like that's a really good thing. And then I feel like I was thinking while you were talking, there's the interpersonal aspect that like, I feel like we've talked a lot about logistics, like how, but like the who I think is really important too, that I think so many of us, even as adults, we all have these like little teenagers, like the little middle school version of ourselves. I feel like it's really, really loud when you move to a new place. And I feel like it's because a lot of us, the last time that we've had to really put ourselves out there and be like, do you want to be my friend? Was maybe at like a new school, or like when you transition from elementary to middle or middle to high school, or even like college orientation, and you're all just like wandering around hoping that you connect with someone. I feel like it's easy to take that mindset as an adult in a new city and to assume that we're all going to be the teenage versions of ourselves. And let's be honest, like we weren't at our most empathetic or compassionate. At least I wasn't as a teenager, but as an adult, like I have seen enough and I've done enough new, really hard things, especially socially, that I feel like I have so much more empathy in those situations. So it's like, if you're in middle school and a super rando came up to you and was like, hey, would you ever want to go for coffee? You would probably like be judgmental, or like I would have been judgmental, like, oh my God, who's this weirdo? But adult me is like, wow, that is so brave. I love that that person approached me. Like, that's so hard to approach someone and ask. And even if it's a no from me, and like you're allowed to say no, I'm able to take that stance of compassion towards them, and to recognize that most of the other adults in the world, in the city of Nashville, are also not the middle school versions of themselves, and are also, I feel like we're also worried about the other person is going to think. But like so many of us have done that so many times that it's like, I think it's really important to remember it's a bunch of 20 to 30-year-olds walking around and probably trying to make friends themselves. And even if they don't want to be your person, they're going to be compassionate towards you looking for your person. So I think that that's so important to keep in mind, that everyone's kind of doing the same thing.
And you're not in middle school anymore.
And no one's judging you. No one's thinking about you. Yeah. Even like, I feel like when you were talking about the coffee shop and how it's laid out, I feel like in new places, at least for me, yeah, like that nervous little seventh grader comes out and I'm like, well, if I stand in the wrong place, people are going to think it's weird. And it's like, no, literally no one is thinking about me at any given moment. People are caught up in their own stuff. Or if they do notice, I feel like for the most part, people have compassion and are like, oh, like she doesn't know where to stand. They're going to be like, hey, go over there. Like, I think that is helpful for me to put myself in that mindset. Now that I've done it again too, I'm like, for the most part, people are approaching me with tenderness and not with judgment.
That is so life-changing. That perspective. Because you're exactly right. Like it's like we just zoom back to being these small nervous versions of ourselves, because you're right. That's like probably the last time that we really did this, or it was such a jarring, scarring experience to be the new kid, that it's like, even if you've been the new kid a couple times since and it like has gone fine, you still like, I still feel like I'm, a freshman in high school again. And I'm like walking and I have my lunch tray and like desperately, I just want to sit in the bathroom so I don't have to figure out where to like, put my tray. But you're right that like I'm not middle school or high school version like me anymore, because thank God she like wasn't that kind sometimes. Yeah. And then other times she just was a puddle and trying to figure out where to put her lunch tray. So I was both.
Yeah.
But like I'm not that version anymore, and neither are other people. And occasionally maybe you do run into someone who like has not grown out of that. Okay, well then that's a very clear sign that that's not your person.
Exactly.
If someone like
them. Yeah,
and that's about them. Like if someone like God forbid does laugh at you because you don't know where to stand at the coffee shop, like you can very clearly know that that person has some stuff to work out in themselves, and that they are not your person.
Yeah.
So, but the vast majority of people are going to be like, oh, hey, the counter's over there. And you'll go, oh, I've never been here before. And they'll go, oh, are you new? And you go, yeah, I am, blah, blah, blah. And like, then all of a sudden you're talking to someone who's kind.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And I feel like that's important to remember, because, we can tell people all day, put yourself out there, do this, do that. It's like, if you don't, it's the how of that can get really difficult. Of like, well, how do I put myself out there? I don't feel brave enough. And it's like, neither does anyone. Neither does anyone.
Yeah. I was just talking about this weekend, because this weekend I was at a conference, and any situation where you have to go in and that like you're basically networking, you're meeting a bunch of people you don't know, you're trying to remember a bunch of names, you're trying to work up the courage to go say hi to people that you like, have never met before. The whole thing is like just nerve-wracking. And so I was thinking a lot about my dad, because I feel like something that my dad really imparted to me growing up was that like you just don't have anything to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And like that, if you walk away from any situation with your pride and your cards still held tightly to your chest, that like you're just really not walking away with much. Because it's either you get to walk away like having saved face or with your pride or whatever, or you get to walk away knowing that you did the very best to make this relationship work out, or to know that you put your very best self out there and there's nothing more you could have done, and you have that peace. Or you walk away with a new friend, or you walk away knowing that he likes you back, or you walk away having gotten a new job or something. But it's just, your pride just really isn't worth very much.
Yeah.
And so walking away doesn't keep you safe. It keeps you from really good things. And so I just thought about that a lot. So there were so many times this weekend where I just like said hi to someone that I had never met before, or like I knew who they were, but I hadn't met them. And so I walked up and stuck out my hand and was like, "Hi, I'm Stephanie." And sometimes it was great. And sometimes it was super awkward. And like, but it was fine. Like I really I didn't lose anything, and I actually gained so much. But I just remember so many times growing up, like I would see someone that I would kind of know, but not know, or like someone, this is so random. We were at Red Robin one time, and there was a Olympic swimmer there, and she was just at another table, and like, my dad recognized her, and he was like, "It'd be cool to get her autograph, wouldn't it?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Go ask her." And I'm like, no way. And he just is like, "Steph, like you really don't have anything to lose in this moment. Just go say hi." And so I did, and I was so glad I did. And there just has never been a time that I'm upset that I said hi. There are a million times where I'm upset that I didn't.
That's so true. That's really good advice. That's wise. Yeah. It's like you're always going to beat yourself up for the opposite of what you might initially think. Yeah.
Yeah. But really, like everyone is nervous.
Yeah.
Everyone is nervous. I just don't know. Like, it's just something that everybody feels and that we just have to push through. And we don't get to wait until that nervousness goes away, because I just don't know that it does. And if it does go away, it goes away because we've practiced enough times. And so it's like only through doing it nervous, doing it scared, that you ever get to a time where you can do it not scared.
Yeah.
But it's not something you just like wait for.
Oh, 100%.
Marri, I want to ask you, so you just moved again, and I would love to, well, first of all, when you told me you were moving, I cried. Just cried. Because I think, it's
right in the middle of the restaurant, I was like, should have done this privately.
Totally didn't care. I didn't care. I mostly just was like, please don't move. But I do want to hear, as you were telling me kind of the different things that you guys talked through, the pros and cons, it makes it like, even though like personally I was on the please don't move vote, that was my vote for you. As you told me all the different things that you guys talked through and the things you weighed, I was like, this is really what's right for you. And I've thought about that ever since, that there are all these different kind of things that push you forward and pull you away from different decisions. And I want to hear the process of that, because I think that hearing that will be really helpful for women listening, kind of no matter what they're trying to figure out right now.
Yeah, I think it was interesting to reflect on the two moves. I think that it depends on the season of your life that you're in. There are seasons I've moved a lot. Drew and I have moved a lot together, not to new cities, like moved around a lot in the Boston area and then to Nashville. But there was a huge season of our life where we were making our decisions on present or like very close future Drew and Marri, like what they needed, what they wanted. And, your 20s are a great season for that. Or at least mine were. It's like I was making decisions for present day me, or for, me 1 year from now. And that served us really, really well for a season. Drew and I we're moving into a new season of our life. We've got 3 kids. Our oldest is 8. My career is developing, his career is fairly established. And the decisions that we're making now, necessarily, because our kids are getting older, we're making decisions for future Drew and future Marri, like 5, 6, 7 years down the line. And that can be a lot more complicated because some of it you're guessing. And it's finding that tough balance between, you don't want to make decisions out of fear, but you also have to sort of, predict a little bit or guess a little bit and move against that in your decision making. So we were considering a lot of different things, like the schools we wanted our kids to go to, the type of childcare that we wanted for them, the family that we wanted involved in their life. The house that we had in Nashville, we loved so much. It was such a sweet house. But we were really, really rapidly outgrowing it. And we had done lockdown. We had done 2 years of COVID in that house, doing, at-home learning with our daughter. So she needed to be on her online kindergarten. We both had our computers, we're all out there on our separate computers, just trying to make it work, trying to be quiet. And we were just pretty rapidly outgrowing the house that we were in. So we're like, okay, we either need to go drop $10,000 at IKEA, organizing this house and turning so many places that are not storage into storage. Or we need to consider the fact that we might be ready for a different house. Okay, well, if we're ready for a different house, now the door's open to that house being somewhere else. Do we want it to be in a different neighborhood? Do we want it to be in a different city? Or do we want it to be in a different state? So then it sort of opened the doors, the decisions kind of branch off of each other. And it wasn't just well, where do we want to be next year? It was kind of okay, well, in 3 years, Ada will be in middle school. What do we think about the middle schools? Where would we want her to go to middle school? Okay, at some point, our kids are all going to be in school and childcare will look different. What do we want from that? We have grandparents in the picture. How involved do we want them to be, and in what ways do we want them to be involved? So there was a lot of factors at play, and a lot of them future factors that we kind of just had to. And then there's also the whole financial aspect of the market at the time. Nashville, our house was worth probably more than it ever would be ever again. And, we were hearing a lot of talk about a recession coming up. So it was kind of okay, well, if we want to sell, now when might be the best time to sell our house? So there was just a lot of factors at play. And it was probably the most complex decision we've had to make. As far as moving, before it was just kind of it would be funny, it would be cool. And this one was okay, this feels like a decision that we'll have to live with for a much longer time. And it's not just about what is funny and cool to Drew and I anymore. There are 3 small people whose, futures depend on the decisions that we're going to make. So that was hard. And there was a time limit on it. We wanted to move before school started so that Ada didn't have to be the new kid. Because we know how hard that is. We didn't want her to be the new kid in the middle of the year. So it was tricky and complex, and a lot of factors at play. And it just was the same sort of thing, that there were certain doors that we approached with open hands that were kind of okay, here's what we're thinking. Let's see what God does. And we just kind of got drop kicked through, and we're okay, I guess we're on the right track. I mean, it just sometimes feels like a guessing game where you just get the smallest encouragements along the way, and you just have to keep moving. So that, making a decision and making a move as a 35-year-old was a very, very different story from making a move as a 29-year-old. Not even in just the decision factors, but even in reestablishing ourselves here has been a wildly different journey than reestablishing ourselves in Nashville.
What is okay? I have so many follow-up questions. Mm-hmm. How did you guys pick Indy, and how did you guys pick your house?
So we chose Indy because, again, Drew had family. So he had family kind of in the Nashville, Kentucky, Indiana, that 65 strip of states. And his parents at the time in Nashville were living right across the street from us, which was incredible. So we kind of had this community, and it was perfect, especially during COVID. We kind of had our little bubble. Drew's mom helps us a lot with childcare, which is incredible. And they've just become such an integrated part of our everyday life. And they were talking about moving to Indy. Drew's dad had been offered a job there. So it kind of put the seed in our mind, okay, well, if he gets this job, would we go with them? And so a big factor was Drew's parents. Another factor was we had done the city living thing and absolutely loved every second of it. Like you said, Nashville's a wonderful place. People love it because it's very lovable. Mm-hmm. But we had a family vacation during like the summer after all the COVID stuff. And Drew and Ada specifically, we were at a lake house and we just saw such a shift in both of their mental health, being out in nature more. And Drew had been saying for years, like, oh, I just love trees. Trees give me life, that kind of thing. We kind of joke about that. And you know this, he would walk through our alleyway in Nashville because we had a lot of actually old trees in our neighborhood over the alley. And we're just kind of like making do with city nature. You know, you go to the park or like you sit next to your bushes on your front steps, but like it's a little bit different. And Drew was like, I don't know, like weirdly, I never thought I'd say this. We thought we wwere city people through and through. He's like, I kind of want to like live on a chunk of land where like I can't see into my neighbor's window. And we're like, what? Because, you know, that was our reality for so long. And we loved it. We were close friends with all of our neighbors. We loved everything about it.
Yeah.
And so once
I'm looking into my neighbor's window as we're sitting here.
And that's just part of it. And it's wonderful. But he had started realizing, you know, for his mental health, for Ada's mental health, we're like, okay, maybe we need a little bit more nature in our lives. So, okay, if we're going to do that, we're not going to do city anymore. Does that mean we're going to move to the Nashville suburbs? Maybe. Are there other suburbs we would continue and that we would consider? And we were kind of back to what we had done in Boston. We made a list of the suburbs that we would consider. And Indy just made a lot of sense. Drew has family here. His parents were considering moving back. We had friends here that we hadn't seen in a while. Drew grew up here. He went to middle school and high school here and just loved it. I mean, the Midwest is such a special place. And so, I mean, Indy just won the contest, I guess. And we kind of had said like, all right, well, let's just explore some places. So we had a realtor up here and she would send us stuff every once in a while. We tried to buy a couple of houses and it just like didn't even get past the initial, okay, we think that one's cool. And it just wouldn't work out. And so for a while there, we were like, all right, maybe this isn't the thing. And we were able to have such I felt really grateful that, you know, I have friends who have had to move, like, you know, they got a job and it's like new city for me. I have to find a place to live. I did feel very fortunate that there was no urgency on our end, really. We're like, all right, if it doesn't work out, we'll continue to live in our house that we love with our friends that we love in our neighborhood that we love. Like it's a win-win. And so we had set, but we were like, you know, we're not going to do this for a year. You know, house hunting is stressful, you know that. So we had said, okay, if by the 4th of July, we haven't found a house, we're just going to stop. Because I had a deadline for my book. Ada had to start school. We were like, okay, that's it. And on the 4th of July, on the 3rd of July, we looked at this house that we're currently in, and spoiler alert, we got it. On the 5th of July, we got the call that an offer had been accepted, and we were able to, you know, bring our kids here and show them. It was very sweet. So we're like 2 minutes away from some of our kids' best friends, which was really wonderful. I feel like there are people who follow the podcast that are aware of like the Ada Calvin saga. Ada now lives 2 minutes away from Calvin, and that's just like her favorite thing. So this house was kind of just like, again, one of those things that just like, we were drop kicked through the door. We were like, cool. I wasn't sold on this house right away. I'm not very good at visualizing things. The person who owned it before us had painted every room black, which was tough for me to move past visually. But Drew is really good at that and had said, like, honestly, I feel like a coat of paint, you would love this house. And I just couldn't see it. The first thing we did was paint it. And he's right. I really love it now. So that was kind of like our, I don't know, the dominoes that had to fall in order for us to end up here.
Yeah. And then you guys are living, as you said, like multi-generationally. And so you're living with how did that happen?
So they had been across the street, like I said, in Nashville. They had bought a house and, you know, moved in truly to help us, which was wonderful. And we just had the best time and just ended up, some of it during COVID through we were forced to be in kind of like a little bubble together, but we found rhythms together. My mother-in-law is awesome. And she and I have a pretty similar way of doing things, I think. So that helps. I know the multi-generational thing is not for everyone, but like she does our laundry and, you know, I make her breakfast and we just kind of had found a rhythm. So then when we had thought about moving, they were already on board with moving because they had considered it for Drew's dad's job. And at one point we considered buying a farm at one point. There was this big farm that it was out of our budget. And so we're like, let's ask them if they want to move to this farm with us, because there was a bunch of different buildings. And we're like, we'll renovate one of the barns and they can live there. And we thought it was this really cool idea. And I'm so glad it didn't work out. Because now I'm like, well, I didn't want to live on a farm. What was I thinking? I'm not a farmer. We just got caught up. I don't know what we were thinking. I thought I would be like a Joanna Gaines. I was like, I'll have a few chickens in my flower garden. That's not my vibe. I don't know what I was thinking. But anyways, they were like, sure, we would consider that. And then we sort of just fell into this pace of looking at places that could possibly work for both of us. At the same time, looking at our own individual places. And this place came up and had space for all of us. And, it's got this little creek and like a good chunk of land. And it has been amazing. So it just worked out. I don't know. There's no magic to it. It just happened a lot of communication, I guess. A lot of constant communication about, would this be okay? And I would say that's the strength. My mother-in-law is very direct communicator. So that was really helpful, that it's like, okay, if we're going to live together, like, here's what we need. Okay. What do you need? Not only, space wise, but even like, okay, here's what we need. Here's when we have quiet time. Here's where we don't want to be interrupted. Here's the boundary we have around dishes, kind of stuff like that. You're taking on roommates. It's like any roommate situation. Yeah. So that's how that worked out. Yeah.
I love this. And the other thing that, I know that you guys really weighed is like, in your childcare is such a big thing. If when you have kids, you have to figure out who's going to take care of them, and they need care all the time. And it's just like, I think that was one of the things that I just didn't, like, it crossed my mind, but I didn't really have a plan for it, before we had our girls. And so figuring all of that out. And so like, there's math to be done there too, in terms of like, this is your job. This is Drew's job. This is what you guys want your jobs to continue to move into. Mm-hmm. So therefore, like, what do you need your childcare situation to look like? And, is you can pay for great childcare. It's still really hard to find, mm-hmm. like, no matter how much you can pay for it. It's, especially in Nashville, I feel like it's really competitive to find. Yeah. There's just not enough. So if anyone's looking for jobs, come to Nashville and work in childcare, because there's plenty of need here. But it's just, that's a whole thing to figure out too. And so like, that's a factor that we all are considering, what does this mean for our job? Like, when we were trying to decide whether we wanted to stay in Nashville or move to Denver, like, so many people, Nashville is such a great place for the kind of work that both Carl and I do. Yeah. And it is possible to do anything remotely, I think, especially at this point. Yeah. But it is really nice that a lot of things happen just down the street from our house. And it's been so good for both of us, both like creatively, for our careers, for like, community, finding other people who do similar work to us. Mm-hmm. And Denver would have been different, especially 10 years ago, 8 years ago when we were looking at this, it would have been different. And so that's a factor to consider as well. And all of these things like just have different weights. Like, you love a city, but the people you love are in a different place. Okay. So which one of those kind of weighs more? And it this is better for work, but this would be better for community. Can one of those things be tweaked so that you can, or is there a place that has both? And there just are so many things to consider. But I think hearing you talk through the ways that you guys considered it and the results that came out of the equation have been so beautiful and so, such a good fit for you guys and your family and your personalities and stuff. I think that helps as we're doing our own equations in our own lives to just hear someone else talk through theirs.
Yeah. And I think it takes a good measure of self-knowledge too, that I knew from our previous move that I can maintain friendship long distance. And I know that there are people who would say like, that is not my thing. I am not a fan of the phone or FaceTime or Marco Polo or like all of the many ways you're able to keep in touch with people now, which is great. So I think that's something to consider too. Like you're saying, like community, like, is that possible here? Is it possible there? I think you also consider like, okay, how do I best keep in touch with people, or how, like, as you're considering your job, sure, you can work remotely, but there are some people whose mental health is really going to suffer from being in your house all day long on a computer with no other humans. Whereas if you live in a certain city and if it has, a hub for your job or whatever, then you could have an office to go to, or if there's a co-working space that is fairly affordable nearby, or, you know what I mean? And the same thing with every friend I have who has kids is doing the whole childcare. Do I do my own childcare? Do I have someone else do it? Do I hire someone? Do we do daycare? That whole wrestle, everyone is in that because it's just a season. And it's also like, there's so many options now. Before it's like daycare or no daycare, but it's like, we can do hybrid sort of things now. People's work schedules are more flexible, and that just makes it more complex. I think that's also something to consider, is like, not only like, what am I capable of doing and what do I prefer, but like, what is my kid capable of? Like, you and I were just talking about this. Like, I have one kid who would have been like a shoe-in for daycare, would have loved it, would have been like, look at all these new friends I can make immediately. Bye, Mom. And then I have another kid who would hate it, who would have hated every single second of it. And those were things that we had to take into account as well. And never mind the whole budgeting aspect of it, that like childcare is expensive. And there's some people who have to make the decision between, okay, do I just take everything I've made at my job this week and hand it over to childcare? Or do I stay home with the kids and try a side hustle? It's like, there's so many different configurations. And to just look at what someone else has done on paper, I think is helpful. But I think I guess what I'm trying to say is like, but also examine yourself and your preferences and what you're capable of, and take an honest look at your abilities and your preferences.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's become just like this heart song for me, is like, we all get to do this differently, and we should, because we're all different. All of our circumstances are different. And so like, I mean, right before we hopped on, I was like, are 2-year-olds like big enough to go to school? I mean, I don't know. I've never had 2-year-olds before, and I've never I don't know. I don't remember going to preschool, and I don't know. And you're like, well, Noah would have absolutely loved it. Like, see you later, Mom. And then Asher would hate it. And so it's not about 2-year-olds, and it's not about school. It's about your 2-year-olds in that school, and, their personality, and, kind of how it all fits. And I just feel like that's something I'm learning over and over and over in all corners of my life, is to just really take in the information that's out there, hear from wise people, but then also look at where we are and where we want to go, and to really take those things into consideration also, because it's just not one size fits all.
Yeah, and it's so tricky, but also I think like when we step back and consider what you just said, that like everyone's different, it can be like really beautiful and affirming. Like Amy Poehler has this line in one of her books where she's talking about how the whole stay-at-home mom versus like working mom thing, especially I guess in Hollywood, can be very contentious. And she just says, good for you, not for me. And I feel like I see that so often in like the whole work-life mom balance with other friends, but also with so many things. Like, you're raising kids in the city, good for you. Turns out, not for me. Like, you drive a minivan, good for you, not for me. And to see that is so good for this other person, and you're able to like extend so much like joy and compassion for their situation, but you also are then giving that same gift to yourself of like, that's not for me, that's so great. Like, I'm just different, and that's okay. And I think our kids really benefit from us having that attitude too. Like, I feel like we say that to our daughter sometimes, like, oh, well, our family's just different, and that's okay. Like, oh, our family does that differently. And that not only I think assures her, but it also is like creating empathy and compassion for her towards other families, where it's like, oh, they're weird. It's like, we just do things differently. They do things differently. Isn't that so cool that we get to learn about other families? Like, we made this decision differently. Good for them, not for us. Cool.
Love that so much. That's really one of my favorite things about Girls Night is getting to share the things that, the whole point of this podcast in the first place was to get to share the conversations that I'm having with my friends.
Yeah.
because my friends are brilliant, as everyone's seeing right now and as everyone's gotten to see throughout the years from you, Marri. But like, these are the conversations we've been having so much over the last handful of years.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad to get to share them, because that phrase, like, I mean, you know, you and I were waiting for our sandwiches at our favorite sandwich spot, you know, as you told me that, the good for you, not for me thing. And it just is, it really is true. Every one of our circumstances is different, and we're all different. And we get to choose what this looks like for us. And I mean, we have to choose, and that's intimidating, but we get to, and that's, I just like, for some people, intergenerational living, like living with your in-laws, like don't do it. For everyone's mental health, like run away, don't do it. But for some people, like, that is so beautiful. Do it. That's an option for you. And like, everyone will benefit from you guys living together. Like, what a beautiful way to live. And also, like, so, you know, a way that so many people around the world live their lives just so beautifully. Like, that's an option. And we kind of forget that in the US. But then also for some people, don't do it with your family, because it's just not good for anybody. So it really depends, you know, and everything is like that.
Agreed.
For women who are moving to a new place right now, Mar, now that you've done this, you know, as many times as you have, and having the empathy of being in it again right now, what are some like just takeaways for them? Like, don't forget this, bring this with you, try this, you know, just anything, any like care package, you know, lunch sack for the road that you can send to women.
Okay, I think I would say 3 things. Like, first of all, kind of what we talked about earlier, like, have the perspective that people are being more generous and compassionate to you than you think. And you can be more generous and compassionate to yourself than you think. Because I think that eases some of the pressure, and it makes it easier to just put yourself out there, which is a huge part of moving to a new city, like saying yes to things. The second thing I would say is, I think it's like actually very similar to what you teach in your single life course, Steph, that like, I think one of the most effective and efficient ways to build community is to build your own rhythms and then invite other people into them. So depending on your season, that might look different. So like, I have one of my friends is single. She's in her late 20s and she lives in Nashville, and she lives near this really cool bar. And every week on a certain night, they have like a frequent flyer card at this bar or whatever. And it's like, you get a certain amount of drinks, whatever. I don't know. It's like, you get the stamps. And she just has established this rhythm of going to this same place once a week. She gets a drink. And so then when she makes a new friend, like invites that friend into her rhythm and is like, I think it's just an easier yes when someone is, instead of saying like, hey, would you ever want to get a drink sometimes? Like, that can feel really vague and difficult to commit to, but it also, I don't know, it feels like there's more pressure than if someone is like, I'm already doing this thing, if you want to tag along. I think it feels very cozy to be invited into someone's rhythm, but it doesn't feel like if you say no, you're crushing them. They're like, I'm already doing this thing. So it's like, you know, whether it's doing like a trivia night, like if you're young and married and you're looking to meet other couples, or if you're like whatever stage you're in, it's like, oh, every Tuesday we do this trivia night. Would you guys ever want to meet up for that? It's super fun at, you know, X place. Or I feel like it's been especially helpful, a season of new momming, especially when you have really, really young kids, super hands-on. It can be really difficult to make community. And I know that can be a really lonely season for lots of women. And there is the classic like moms groups and stuff that you can do. And I know a lot of friends who have gotten so much life and so many wonderful experiences through that. But I feel like it can also, like if you're a working mom, that can be more complex. So one thing I think is really helpful and easy is like if you have like your park you go to, or if you have your thing, it's so much less pressure to like, say your kids are really enjoying playing with this one kid, instead of like, let's set up a play date sometime. That can be really intimidating. And then you're like committing to not only your kid being friends with this kid, but like you and the mom are then in community together, whether you like it or not. It's a way lower pressure ask to say, oh, usually after pickup, we go to this playground right over here. If you guys ever wanted to meet up with us, we're usually playing there for about an hour or so after school pickup. You know what I mean? Or like on Sundays, after church, we usually grab coffee and then we hang out at such and such a park. You guys ever want to take a walk with us? Or even like, I feel like walks are such a wonderful way to make a new friend. Because you're not just sitting there staring into each other's eyes having a moment. It can be really low stakes and you're moving your body and it just loosens you up in general. So I feel like if you build a rhythm for your life, build a life that you love and then invite other people into it, that is so, I feel like it's not only this like cozy, wonderful feeling when someone does that for you, but it also is like low stakes for everyone. And bonus, you're building a life that you love. Like you should be doing that anyways. I think that is something I've tried to be more intentional with this move. I think because I'm more comfortable with the decisions I've made in life and I feel more established in what I do. And also because my life is very scheduled. I've got 3 kids. Like there's not a lot of wiggle room to be like, would you ever want to meet up with a coffee at some point? Like I can't do that, but I can say, I drop my daughter off at preschool every Tuesday and Thursday at 9. Like I drive right past that Starbucks. Like, do you want to take a walk through the park or like blah, 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 whatever. When I pick her up, I always go to this playground. Do you want to meet me there? I just feel like that I said 3 things and now I can't remember the third thing. So that's number 2 and 3.
Yeah. We, something that scheduling friend time is hard. Like, it's like, we're still figuring out how to have like dates and what we want that to look like for us, and getting a childcare for that but we've been busy all day. And so we kind of just want to do nothing. But then the girls, like the weekends don't look like they used to because we can't just like sit around and do nothing. We have to do something. And so what we've been learning is like that's a really good time to hang out with friends is like, well, we're all doing something. So let's do something together. And so our thing for the last probably year or so is that every Sunday, Carl makes pancakes. And so we've started to just invite friends over for pancakes. And our house is a good kid house now because we've had to totally baby-proof everything. So it's like, it's indestructible for our kids and other people's kids. And we have toys. So it's like, everyone just come over. Carl will make pancakes, bring your kids, and we'll just let them play and we'll hang out. And it's become just this like, and we're doing it anyway. So it's like, whether you're there or not, we will be having pancakes on Sunday.
Exactly.
If you'd like to come,
our day. Yeah.
If you'd like to come, like, and we're not getting anything productive done anyway. It's like, that's not time we're spending doing anything else. So there might as well be other people here. And so it just, I really like that. I really like that.
Yeah.
Mar, I love you so much.
I love you too.
I just am so grateful for a million things. I'll start crying if I talk too much about you. But I'm so glad that the women got to hear this from you because you've been so inspiring to me in this area of life and so many other ones. I know that you have a lot of things coming up in the next year work-wise that I'm going to be obnoxiously, I'm going to be talking about your book once it's available to an obnoxious degree. So everyone you can just say like, see you soon to Marri because that's coming your way. But I love you, friend. Thanks for coming on the show.
I love you too. Thanks for having me. It was good to be here again.